Hello. Hello and welcome to the 50 Women Over 50 podcast. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie. Hey, I want to give a shout out to all my new subscribers from Dodgeville, Wisconsin. There's been a lot of you this week, so welcome to you all. On this podcast, I highlight women who have broken barriers, challenged the status quo, or have simply lived remarkable lives beyond the age of 50. So far, my guests have included pioneering entrepreneurs, passionate activists, artists, educators, and more. So get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as together we extol the lives of 50 exceptional women over 50. Today I'm welcoming best-selling, multiple award-winning author, playwright, and performer, Alison Wearing to the show. Alison's critically acclaimed book, Confession of a Fairy's Daughter, Growing Up with a Gay Dad, was a national bestseller. Her solo play, based on this memoir, has also won top awards in virtually every festival in which it appeared. In this interview, she shares about what she learned from Aztec culture, about life in your 50s, and she talks about how she helps women step into their own creativity to help them write their life stories. Tell me about your 50th birthday.
I turned 50 in Stratford, Ontario. We were living in this fabulous community where the neighbors are on all sides. We all got along really well. And two of us shared a driveway. And we used to host dinner parties in the driveway. We would string up lights over the driveway and move furniture in there and then do a potluck style dinner. And so we did one of those. For my 50th birthday, my neighbor, she created and painted this huge round table that we would use for these driveway parties. And she painted it bright orange because she said being 50 is about stepping into full, bold color. And so we celebrated by sitting around that huge round table under these sort of Christmas lights strung over the driveway and toasted ourselves because we were mostly women over 50.
This color thing, because I was having a look through your website and bold colors galore, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something that happened the day I turned 50, but it's something I was stepping into. And you can see behind me, my house is, we lived for about a decade in Mexico, and that is a place that celebrates color in all ways. And I really enjoyed that and found it so uplifting to be surrounded by that bold color. We don't do that much in this part of the world. It's all very muted and restrained. But I think there's an actual energetic quality to color, and bright color is high energy. It's high intensity. And it feels like when I wear it, I'm offering that to the world. And when I surround myself with it, it uplifts me. You should see my house.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about this. I was recently shopping for a car, and I live in Ottawa, the town that fun forgot. And so
I've never heard that.
The car salesman guy told me that all they can order in terms of colors for cars to Ottawa, the only things they can sell is black, white, silver,
right.
Nothing bright, nothing but muted tones and neutral tones, because otherwise the cars never move. So that's why your website really stood out to me, because it really it's saturated in gorgeous color.
Thank you.
So you're coming up to your birthday. You were hitting 50. How did you feel about it?
I wasn't dreading it, I wouldn't say, because I had a lot of terrific role models around me of women who were 10 years older than I was and still just rocking their lives. And I remember toasting and saying, I'm 50. For me, it was a celebration. The 40s for me were, I don't know. They had their challenges, I guess. I was really happy to be stepping into what felt like, a new era that I was going to define, I suppose.
Tell me a little bit about the role models you mentioned. Who were you looking up to at that time?
Well, my next door neighbor, who is my doppelganger, it was really weird because we're the same height. We have the same sort of body type. We share clothes all the time, and we have the same hair. And you can't see my hair, but it's just pretty unusual. It's just very curly, big curly hair. And we both have the same. It's just weird. We moved into each other, not knowing each other. And even our husbands at close range can confuse us. This is how simple we are. And she is an actor, and she was with the Stratford Festival for 23 years, I think. And then she was one of the actors in Come From Away, if you saw that musical.
Yes.
And she just had just a playful approach to life. And she is almost 10 years older than I was. I just kept looking at her and thinking, well, if I'm going to be that, if that's what's coming, bring it on. I'm ready.
It really talks to about the importance of role models at every single stage of life. Because we were talking before we started today about how this whole project started, that I was like really feeling isolated and by myself and didn't really have a lot of role models coming out of the pandemic of women that were in their 50s and 60s because, well, we're all isolated, weren't we? Yeah. I think that's one of the lessons I've learned through this project is the importance of role models and looking at how other people are living and learning from them.
Yeah, and we're a very stratified society here in North America or in Western culture. It's one of the things I loved about Mexico is that you are friends with people 20 years younger, 20 years older, and everybody's interacting in the same parties, dinners, cafes, restaurants. There are all ages, even the dance club in this little town where we used to live. The dance club had 18-year-olds and 80-year-olds dancing on the same dance floor to the same music. And I loved that. And I miss that here.
That's so interesting. Like that. I hadn't really reflected on that before now, but what you're saying is true. Because I always was kind of age agnostic, and I always had friends quite a bit older than me and then also quite a bit younger than me. But I remember when I found out I was old, and it was because I was working in Washington, D.C. at an agency, and I was like maybe mid to upper 30s. And the younger kid, well, I say kids, but they were colleagues to me at the time. I didn't really see them as kids. They were doing stuff that 20-somethings do and going out. And I always thought, well, they mustn't like me because they never invite me along or anything. And I mentioned it to my boss. I said, I don't think the team likes me. I don't know what I've done, but every day they're making plans for tonight. They never invite me along. She was like, oh, that's got nothing to do with them liking you. It's just that you're old. But that was about the first time I really considered myself of a different generation from younger people. It was quite eye-opening moment for me. But you are kind of right about that. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, now my daughter's at that age and they're all, oh my God, 40's coming and be over the hill. And I just laugh at them. And did anything surprise you about life after 50?
Well, a lot happened. It felt like I swallowed my birthday cake and then a few things happened. I suddenly had to wear glasses. I suddenly got hot flashes. I suddenly got gray hair and my son left home. Really, it felt it happened in about 5 days. In the 5 subsequent days following that party, all of these things started to happen. That in itself was a bit alarming. And it was humbling. I think the most humbling experiences of our lives are the richest ones. And that was humbling. And it didn't really depress me or anything. I was just very aware of it. The other thing that happens is that your hormones, I've read this subsequently, you suddenly, it's as though your body, that they know things are shutting down, the shop's shutting down, and you better get out there. This is sort of last call. I've never been so attracted to other people and sort of sending out pheromones. I think it was pretty fun, actually. I felt like I was, I don't know. It was some kind of swan song. I don't know how to describe it, but it was a fun time. Yeah.
Talk about your love life.
Well, I was with the father of my son for 20 years, and that relationship ended when I was about 51, I think, very shortly after that. And that was another big shift that I hadn't really anticipated. And we actually ended up living together again because of COVID. It's sort of a complicated story. We're very good friends. But it was this shift. And I remember when it happened, realizing, oh, this is just part of what is opening for me. Things are closing, yes, and other things are opening. And this is one of those things that is manifesting. And in Mexico, and I lived in a culturally Aztec part of Mexico, 52 is called New Fire. It's the year of new fire. And so when I turned 52,
what's that?
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And when I turned 52, I was living back in Mexico, and I had a 52nd birthday party, which is of more significance to them than the decade. And they were really just celebrating the new fire in me. It was very special.
Oh, I love that idea. New fire. Does that come from their language, their ancient Aztec language?
Yeah, it's an Aztec. Yeah, it's an old Aztec tradition.
I've never heard of that
And
before.
way of counting cycles. This 52-year cycle is a very important cycle. And as human beings, we only get one of those, obviously. But they track those 52-year cycles in the calendar and so on.
Yeah. Well, really, just up until 3 generations ago, we were lucky to make it to 52. Really.
Yeah, right.
You know, that was a lifetime, a human lifetime for sure. For sure. Your life has changed a lot since then. You became newly single. I've read your bio, and it looks to me like you've been on the move most of your adult life. You're settled now in Stratford-upon-Avon in Ontario.
Yeah, settled. I would say somewhat settled. I do have a base here, and I love having a base in this town. It's a town whose main industry is theater. That's really hard to find in the world. But I'm a writer and performer, and so it's a beautiful thing to be able to live in a place that celebrates theater. And when you live here year round, it sort of feels as though you're living backstage, which is terrific. Yeah. But
let's go there someday. I have not. I've been to the Stratford over the pond.
Oh, okay. Oh no,
Someday.
Stratford's pretty nice, huh? Yeah. And the theater festival is terrific. It goes almost 6 months of the year or more, maybe even more. It's sort of 6 months on where the shows are on, people are performing, and then 6 months off where people are creating, and there's a lot of internal work that goes on. It's a very interesting place to visit, but also to live in.
Tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing these days.
Well, one of the big things that happened to me in my 50s was that I became a CEO very accidentally. I've been writing and performing. Well, I've been writing my whole adult life, and then I fell into performing in my 40s, and I started touring. I would write and create and perform one-woman shows, and that was my primary focus and livelihood for about almost a decade, I'd say. And then COVID. And like every other performer, I was grounded and put inside. And what I'd also started doing, though, as I was performing, I would perform one day and then give a writing workshop the next day. That became the thing. Yeah. And I was getting more and more requests for these workshops or retreats, writing retreats and things. And I found that I was saying a similar set of things each time. And I thought I should just record these standard lessons and the explanations of the tools that most people need when they're writing memoir, whether they're experienced writers or they're brand new. That fascinated me, that people come up against a similar series of obstacles and questions during the process. I recorded all these, and then I developed what felt like it was a pretty solid online course. And I finished it right when the whole world tipped over and we all got locked down. And at first it felt like terrible timing, but then within a few months, I realized, no, this is spectacular timing because everyone's inside looking for things to do. And so I launched the course, and it absolutely exploded beyond my wildest expectations. And within the first year, we had 1,500 students all around the world. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was remarkable. And then I was having to hire people to help me because I couldn't possibly manage all this. I was doing it with one virtual assistant. And then within a year, I had a team of 10 people. And then I had to incorporate, and suddenly I was the CEO. And I just thought, oh, this is fabulous. I would never, ever have imagined this. I never wanted that kind of thing in my life. It's not something I dreamed about, put on a vision board, nothing. It just that I stepped into it. I really, I took it on as a great challenge, and it has been a wild ride. I'm now 3 years into it, 3.5, I guess now. And we have, over 3,000 graduates, and the program is really, it's now, we've just tightened it, and it's now really working at its optimal level, I would say. And now it's really fun because graduates are sending me announcements of their book projects, or they just won a contest, or they've just been published here. Now we're on the other side of a lot of that, and so it's gratifying. It's been wonderful. That was a total surprise.
What do you think is driving this whole trend, I guess it is, for people to write their memoirs?
Well, I think our personal stories are sacred. There's nothing new about memoir writing in that we have been gathering around, particularly women. We have been gathering and telling the stories about our lives as long as there have been communities. In fact, that is what weaves community together. And we did it around kitchen tables. We did it around fires. We did it around over the fence, whatever it was. We've always exchanged the stories of our lives. It's how we make sense of our lives, and is how we connect and weave ourselves together, as I said, into community. And that isn't new. What's new is that we have been given permission to tell those stories in written form. What's changed is that it used to only be famous people who wrote their memoirs. And then a few decades ago, well, this has been happening in very small numbers over the last, 150 years maybe. But in recent times, there have been people who've stepped up and told stories in such a way that it's not just their recounting of their personal story. Their personal story is resonating with a wider audience because what they're doing and the trick with memoir is that it's not just what happened to me. It's what happened to me, and here's why it matters. And here's why it should matter to someone else. And there is a universality to our story, to our human journey, especially to the trials and that we have had to face and rise above and get beyond in some cases, or we can't change what happened to us, but we can change the perspective we have on it. We can change our perception of the events and the meaning we are making of them. And that shift is hugely powerful. And it not only is it hugely powerful as a book or as a story, but it's very powerful for the writer as well. That's when we become the author of our lives. And we can't change the past, but we can change the meaning we accord it.
Well, I'm guessing just based on the whole DNA of what a memoir is, that your clients must be mostly over 50.
They are indeed. Yeah. Yeah, they are mostly over 50 and mostly women who have spent, a lot of them, a good deal of their lives tending to others' stories, the voices and stories of others, and in the most beautiful way. There's been a generosity that has driven that part of their lives. And most of the women who then come to feel, I have a story and my story is valuable and I would like to set my voice and my story down on paper. Those women tend to be, or those people tend to be, over 50, and that a phase of their life has ended, and now they're really ready to step into to the honoring of their voice and their story. And I think I say to people, when you're called to write your story, what you're doing is responding to an urge within you. There is something in you that longs to be born. And honoring that, I believe, is a sacred impulse. There's something invaluable about that, priceless about that may or may not have anything to do with publishing. But even setting down our story and then shaping it, learning how to shape it into a story that may have resonance for other people. I'm always astonished and really, so grateful for the emails that I received from people who say, I never imagined that I would feel this way about this story. I never imagined I would feel liberated by it or liberated from it by writing it down. I expected the opposite, but I just can see it freshly. I can see it and understand it for the first time. And it's this side benefit, I call it, to this work. We go into it thinking, I'm going to write. This is all about writing. But in order to write the story well, and this has always fascinated me, often when I'm working with people, I can see that what the story needs in order to work, what the story is really, there's some knot in the story that needs to be unraveled or worked out in some way. It is actually also what the writer needs to do in relation to the story. And when we're crafting, but when we're just focusing on making it a great story, it's as though that sort of therapeutic or internal work happens almost by chance. We're not deliberately doing or trying to change anything. All we're doing is trying to make this the best story or iteration of the story we possibly can. And there's I've watched it again and again and again and again. There's something that shifts when the story ceases to become my story, me, this is what defines me. And when it becomes a story in which I am a character, or I was a character, and now I am over here crafting that story.
It sounds to me like the process of delivering the story is the biggest benefit, more than the actually having a finished work to live on the shelf. I don't know what happens with your clients. What do they do with their memoirs once they've written them?
Yeah, it depends. Some do go on to publish them as books and get agents and publishing contracts and all those exciting things. And some give them as gifts to their children or grandchildren. Mm-hmm. Some create a work of art out of it that is for them alone, and no one else is ever meant to read this. It really, really varies. Some actually start publishing smaller excerpts along the way, and I really encourage people to do that, because the tendency is to think, well, I've got a story, so now I have to write a book, which is the equivalent to saying, well, I'm interested in taking up tennis. I better win the US Open.
Exactly.
A book is not the place to start. It's the best way to get frustrated, overwhelmed, and land on your knees and never finish. But if you start, I love to encourage people to think of the beauty of small things, small personal essays, small excerpts. When we think small, we can actually begin to assemble the parts of a book, but we don't need to take that on and soon right out the door, which I think is a danger that awaits people who feel that that's the only option. And I just love to make it clear that is a memoir. Can be 1 page, it can be 10 pages, it can be 100 pages. I just today put out the list of the stories. I run an annual memoir writing contest for short works of memoir. It's 2,000 words or less, or maybe it's 2,500 words. I can't remember. Anyway, it's for short works of memoir. And this year it's in honor of a writer who came to one of my writing retreats in France, a young woman, Amy McCrae. She was 34 when she came to the writing retreat in 2019 with a 4-year-old daughter. And she had terminal ovarian cancer, and she was writing about that experience. And she died within a year. And just after she died, a few weeks after she died, the CBC contacted me and said how to get in touch with Amy McCrae. And I said, Amy just died. Why are you contacting her? And they were contacting her because she had just been shortlisted for the CBC prize for stories that she'd worked on during our retreat. And it was very moving. I was, just thrilled for her and heartbroken for her at the same time. And I decided to create a contest in her honor.
Oh, that's nice.
And so we just announced the long list this morning. We had over 300 entries this year, and 33 of those made the long list. And now the judge is going to choose a short list and a winner, which will be announced in October.
Well, I'll certainly put a link to the long list in the show notes so that our listeners can take a look at it.
Sure.
Would you have any advice for your 30-year-old self?
Relax.
In a word.
Yeah, I think that's really it. There seems to be a lot of, that's one of the beauties. I think we must all feel that as we get older, that we realize, we can just relax. There's no rush. There's no race. There's nothing you have to do or have done. That's what I would, breathe more, sit down more, lie down on the grass more and look at the sky.
Yeah. Don't be in such a rush all the time. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wish I could redo that part of my life. That's for sure. I was a mother quite young. And really, really busy, and busy with being busy. That didn't take too long for the girls to grow up and leave. And I'm really taking the time with the grandchildren. I think that's part of the gift of grandchildren, isn't it? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I see myself in 10 years. Even more joyful than I am now, I guess. I want to dance more. I love dancing. And that's something I'd love to do more of in my 50s and 60s. I dance every Monday of the summer. I danced on the beach with a friend of mine who leads a dance on the beach event up on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario. And it's all women over 50. Lots of women in their 60s, 70s, 80s. I just loved it. And there we are at sunset every Monday night dancing on the beach. That is a glorious thing. That's an image that I hold as, I put it on my mental horizon, that let there be dancing. I'd love also to be getting back to writing. I'm performing again now, starting actually next week, but my energy has gone so much into this online course and being, as I said, a CEO, that my own writing has taken a bit of a beating or a backseat, and I look forward to getting back to my own writing as well.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. You have to be very disciplined about that, because my dream as a young woman was to be a novelist, to be a creative writer. And I was able to use my writing skills to build a career in marketing and PR. And when you have to do it every day at work, it's not much fun, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I haven't really ever got back to doing it. I guess the podcast is part of that, right? It's storytelling,
Sure.
one episode at a time thing. But yeah, you're going to have to be real disciplined about not letting work creep into your creative energy, because it's easy to give away. It's hard to conserve.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
What are you most hopeful about for the future?
I think that when we look for beauty, we find it. And I'm hopeful that skill, I guess I'm hopeful for my own inner state. It feels like that's something that I have the most control, and I say that word in the best possible way. That's something that I can tend and care for. And my experience has been that when my inner world is tended to, my outer world tends to reflect that. I guess I'm hopeful in that way, that I have a lot of tools and possibilities for that, and that then it radiates. Once that is, it does feel like an inner garden in a way, and therefore, no, only then do I have the possibility of being generous with all the energy and time and ideas that I have. I'm also hopeful in what I see in young people, which people don't say maybe very often, but I see a lot of self-awareness in the young people that I am surrounded with that we didn't have when I was that age. People were not doing the work of looking at themselves and asking difficult questions. I think we went through, sort of like marauding cattle or something. You're just trying to get out of the gate. And I see a lot of really fascinating and committed and very interesting young people. They probably existed when I was young, but I didn't. I see them in great number, and that inspires me. That makes me hopeful.
I totally agree with you about this. I think the young generation are just remarkable in the ways that you're talking about, the self-awareness, the selflessness.
Yes.
The caring for putting other people's needs above their own. And we grew up in the yuppie generation, whereas I've got mine, you go get your own.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. And I think it's part of what they are faced with climate change and AI and the things that are coming. They realize they're up against a lot, and it's not about going it alone. On the contrary, it's banding together.
Yeah, it's a completely different mindset, and I'm with you. I find it really encouraging. It's the only thing that I feel is going to actually save us is this bright, young, energetic enlightened generation coming up behind us. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Just to get back to what I began talking about, the other thing that I realized, and again, it's inspired by life in Mexico, is that younger generation, they may not realize it, but they also need their elders. And they need their elders to hold space for them in this, in a way that is not formally acknowledged most of the time in this culture. And that I see a real alliance there. And it may not even be an obvious one. It may be a more of an energetic holding of that energy and a support from them. But I feel our role is just as important. It's just it's very clear to me that it's a background role. It's backstage. It's their turn on stage, but everyone on stage needs a backstage crew. It doesn't work otherwise.
It's funny you mentioned the thing about it's their turn, because I was actually with a bunch of women over 50 this weekend, and there was some young 30-somethings having such a boisterously fun time. And we looked at them, we said, well, it's their turn to do this. It's their turn to make a spectacle of themselves and have fun and be loud. And we all did it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now we need to sit back and support them in them having their turn center stage. And I'm excited for what's going to happen, really.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move to the quick round. Got a few quick round questions here, just off the top of your head. Okay. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you binging?
I just read one of the best memoirs I've read in a while, actually, called You Could Make This Place Beautiful. It's by Maggie Smith, the poet, American poet Maggie Smith, not the British actor, but it's one of the finest reads I've had in a while. And I finished it, and then the first thing I did was turn it over and read it again.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll put a link to the show notes so that people can find that. What charity or good causes are you supporting or volunteering for or working for right now?
Well, the main one is the Amy Awards. That contest that I was telling you about raises funds and awareness for ovarian cancer, which is what Amy McCrae died of at the age of 35. And so all the 100% of the contest proceeds go to that award. So I feel very connected to that at the moment. But I also love supporting, UNHCR and the Sierra Club and the David Suzuki Foundation and what is it called? Trees Canada. I like every time that I get on a plane to make sure that I'm donating something to the planting of trees. I know it does not erase the carbon footprint, but I figure at least it does something. At least there are a few more trees standing. Yeah, those are a few.
And what's an app you couldn't live without?
The School of Life. I just discovered it. It's the only app I use. I don't.
What is it? I've never heard of it.
Okay. His name is Alain de Botton, and he is a writer and philosopher. I'm new to the Alain de Botton party. I gather he's been around for decades, but you can find him on YouTube. He's one of the most erudite, but also entertaining, hilarious writers I've come across, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And the School of Life is his response to what he feels is a really rigid and limiting educational system that focuses solely on mental capacities, intellectual capacities. And his response is what he calls an emotional education. And so there's a lot about, I don't even know how to describe it. There's a lot of philosophy, art, a lot of reflections on relationships. He has very, very amusing and very pragmatic and wonderful views on relationships, human relationships, whether they're romantic or whatever it is. He's written many books, and one of which is called The School of Life, but there's an app. It's the only app. Every day I look at it and I learn something from.
Well, I'll definitely have a link to that. I've never even heard of it, and I'm going to check that out. And I'm going to encourage all you listeners out there to check that one out too. I guess that brings me to the end of the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
No, I don't think so. You're pretty thorough.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I guess I could offer, I can offer your listeners, if they're interested in learning more about memoir, I can offer them a free masterclass, which is just AlisonWearing.com/masterclass. And it gives an overview of just what memoir is and a few tips on what to do if you're thinking about writing your own.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes for sure. And I'm probably going to check it out myself because I think it sounds pretty damned interesting. This has been 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. Thank you to my guest, author, and playwright, Alison Wearing. I love the idea that age 52 means new fire, and it's a time when new life and energy is breathed into us all. I'm fascinated by what Alison said about the power of personal storytelling and what it can do for us all. I'm going to check out her Writing Ink program myself. See today's show notes to find links to Alison's socials, her work, and to information about some of the other things we talked about on today's show. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the show, please share a link to it with your friends or drop me a rating or a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also find my show on YouTube, and please follow me on social media too. Let's connect. Let's create a whole community of wise women over 50. See you next time on 50 Women Over 50. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie.